The drive home was quiet in the way that certain silences are quiet. Not empty, not peaceful, but full to the ceiling with everything that was not being said. Jum sat in the back seat of the black vehicle in his charcoal pinstripe suit with his hands resting on his knees, and his dark eyes moving between the passing soul night outside the window and his father's profile in the front seat. Hoseo was in the passenger seat. Not driving, he never drove when his mind was doing what it was doing right now, and he was looking at the road ahead with the particular stillness that Jum had learned over 7 years meant his father was not seeing the road at all. He was seeing something else entirely. Something interior and vast and not available to anyone else in the vehicle. Beck drove. Beck always drove when Hoseo went somewhere he could not be reached. They had been in the car for 11 minutes and nobody had said anything, and Jum had been patient in the way he was always patient, genuinely, not performatively. But 11 minutes was approaching the natural limit of what even his particular brand of patience could hold when the air in the vehicle was this thick with something he could not name. "Daddy," he said. "Yes." Not a word. An acknowledgement. The sound of a man who is very far away confirming that he can still hear you. "Are you all right?" A pause. "Yes," Hoseo said. "You do not sound like yourself," Jum said. Beck's eyes moved briefly to the rearview mirror, then back to the road. Hoseo turned his head and looked at his son in the back seat. In the dark of the vehicle, with the sole streetlights moving across his face in slow ribbons of gold and white, he looked at Jum for a long moment with an expression that the boy could not fully read, which was unusual, because Jum could read his father's face the way other children read picture books. Easily. Naturally. Without effort. But this expression had too many layers. Too many things sitting on top of each other, each one pressing down on the one beneath it. "I am all right," Hoseo said again, more completely this time. "I am thinking." "About the lady?" Jum asked. "Among other things." "She knew you," Jum said. It was not an accusation. It was an observation delivered with the precision of a child who had been in that hospital room and watched two adults say each other's names like they were saying something much larger than names. "When you walked in, she knew exactly who you were." "Yes," Hoseo said. "And you knew her." "Yes. From a long time ago," Jum said, returning the phrase his father had used in the corridor. Returning it carefully, like a thing he had been holding and examining for the last hour. "Yes," Hoseo said. "From a long time ago." Jum looked out the window. The city moved past. A late-night convenience store. A couple walking a small dog. A street vendor beginning to pack up for the night. The ordinary world going about its ordinary business, entirely unaware that something had just shifted permanently in the back seat of a black vehicle moving through it. "The conversation," Jum said. "The long one. The one you said we would have at home." "Yes." "Is it tonight?" Hoseo looked at his son. "It is tonight," he said. "Welcome to Black Silk Stories, the home of Afro-Korean stories that hit different. Subscribe, drop a comment, and do not go anywhere. This is only the beginning." The apartment was the kind of space that declared its inhabitant without needing to announce anything. 16th floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows on two sides. The Han River visible from the left wall. The city grid visible from the right. Soul spread in every direction below like something that had been assembled specifically to be looked at from this height. The furniture was dark and precise. No clutter. No unnecessary objects. Everything chosen for a reason and placed with intention. The kind of interior that belonged to a man who made decisions the same way. Jum's corner of it was different. Not messy. He was not a messy child, but inhabited in a way the rest of the apartment was not. A low bookshelf with books arranged by height and a small collection of things that mattered to him. A compass his father had given him. A smooth stone from a beach he remembered. 3 small figures that had been presents from Beck over the years and which he kept because Beck had given them with the awkward sincerity of a man not accustomed to giving gifts. A desk where he did his schoolwork with the same focused seriousness he brought to everything. They came in from the elevator. Jum went to his desk and sat in his chair. Not because he had work to do but because his desk was where he sat when he needed to think or when something important was happening and he wanted to be in a contained space for it. Hoseo removed his black wool overcoat and hung it on the stand by the door and came and sat in the chair across from his son's desk. The low reading chair that he usually occupied when they talked at the end of the day. He sat forward. Elbows on his knees. He looked at his son. Jum looked back at him. "Ask me what you want to ask," Hoseo said. "Whatever it is." Jum was quiet for a moment. Organizing. He did this before important questions, arranged them in the order that made most sense, discarded the ones that were not essential, kept the ones that were. The lady's name is Mila, he said. Yes. You have known her before tonight. Yes. For a long time. Yes. Did you love her? The apartment was very quiet. Outside the window the Han River moved in the dark, slow and indifferent and permanent. Hoseo held his son's gaze. Yes, he said. Jum absorbed this. His face did not change but something in his eyes shifted. A deepening of attention, like a lens adjusting its focus. Do you still? He asked. Hoseo was quiet for 3 seconds. That, he said, is a more complicated question. Why? Because some things do not have a simple yes or no, Hoseo said. And I will not give you a simple answer when the true one is more complicated. You deserve the true one. Jum considered this seriously. All right, he said. Then why did she leave? And here it was. The room where the conversation had always been going. Hoseo had known it was coming, had known since the car, since the corridor, since the moment Jum looked at him outside the maternity ward door and asked, "Do you know her?" with those eyes that missed nothing and forgot nothing. He had 10 seconds to decide how much of the truth to give a 7-year-old boy at 1 in the morning. He gave him all of it that he could. She did not leave because she wanted to, Hoseo said. His voice was even, careful. The voice of a man choosing every word with the knowledge that these words were going to live in his son's memory for the rest of his life, and they needed to be right. Someone frightened her. Someone told her that if she stayed, something terrible would happen. To her. And to someone she loved. Jum's eyes did not move from his father's face. Who? He asked. I am still finding that out, Hoseo said. Which was true. The name Beck had given him in the corridor was a beginning, not an answer. It was the first thread of something that went much deeper and he needed to pull it carefully. But it was someone who knew you, Jum said. Someone from your world. It was not a question. Jum was 7 years old and he had grown up in this world. Not in its violence, not in its darkness, but in its edges and its atmosphere and its particular way of conducting itself. And he understood certain things about it with the intuitive clarity of a child who had been paying attention his entire life. Yes, Hoseo said. Someone from my world. And she ran, Jum said. She survived, Hoseo said. The correction was immediate and firm and gentle simultaneously. There is a difference. She did not run. She made an impossible choice in an impossible moment and she survived it. That is not the same thing as running. Jum looked at his father for a long moment. You are not angry at her, he said. No, Hoseo said. You looked for her, Jum said. Again, not a question. For 3 years, Hoseo said. I found nothing. Whoever helped her disappear did it thoroughly. She built the M&M group, Jum said slowly. Processing. Assembling. She became a billionaire. She changed her world completely. Yes. So that whoever was looking for her could not find her, Jum said. Yes, Hoseo said. I believe so. The boy was quiet for a moment. Outside the window the city continued its indifferent glittering. She was brave, Jum said. Hoseo looked at his son. Yes, he said quietly. She was. She is. And tonight, Jum said, someone found her anyway. Yes. Her husband. The man she married, Hoseo said carefully. Yes. He is connected to the people who frightened her before, Jum said. Hoseo was very still. What makes you say that? He asked. Because you were not surprised when she told you he did not find her by accident, Jum said. You said no, he did not. Like you already knew. Like the pieces were fitting together for you. Beck had once told Hoseo privately that the young master was going to be either the most formidable person in any room he ever entered or the most exhausting. Hoseo had told him it was going to be both. He was right. Yes, Hoseo said. I believe he is connected. Then she is still in danger, Jum said. Not tonight, Hoseo said. Tonight she is protected. I have people at the hospital. Nobody will go near her or the baby. But tomorrow, Jum said. And after tomorrow. I am going to make sure she is safe, Hoseo said. That is a promise. Jum looked at his father with those serious dark eyes. Then he looked down at his desk. At the compass his father had given him. The smooth stone. The 3 figures from Beck. He was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Hoseo, who knew his son's silences the way a musician knows the spaces between notes, understood that what was coming next was not going to be a simple question. Daddy, Jum said. Yes. Do I have a mother? The Han River moved outside the window. The city glittered and said nothing. Hoseo looked at his son sitting at his small desk in his charcoal pinstripe suit at 1 in the morning with his hands flat on the desk surface and his dark eyes. Her cheekbones, her particular way of going still before something important. Looking at him with the direct and devastating honesty of a child who has decided he is ready for whatever the answer is. Hoseo had known this question was coming since Jum was 4 years old and asked why his friend at school had a mother who came to pick him and who did the picking for Jum. Hoseo had told him then that some families were built differently and that their family was built with love and that was what mattered. Jum had accepted it because he was 4. He was not 4 anymore. Yes, Hoseo said. You have a mother. Something moved through Jum's face. Small and fast and enormous simultaneously. The way a light goes on in a room that has been dark for a long time, flooding every corner at once. Where is she? He asked. His voice was entirely steady. Only someone who knew him as well as Hoseo knew him would have heard the thing underneath the steadiness. Hoseo looked at his son. He took a breath. Jum, he said. I need you to listen to me very carefully. And I need you to trust me. I always trust you, Jum said. I know, Hoseo said. What I am going to tell you next is going to be a lot. And I need you to sit with it before you decide what you feel about it. Can you do that? Yes, Jum said. Hoseo looked at his son. The boy who had his own eyes looking back at him. The boy who had her cheekbones. The boy who had turned a corner on a dark soul street that evening and without knowing it had found the woman who carried him and kept him safe in the only way she could and had been keeping him safe from a distance for 7 years. The lady, Hoseo said. Slowly, clearly, one word at a time. The one in the red dress. The one you found tonight. Jum went very still. Mila, Hoseo said, is your mother. The apartment held its breath. Outside the window the Han River kept moving, slow and permanent and indifferent, the way it had been moving long before this night and would keep moving long after it. Jum did not move. He sat at his desk with his hands flat on the surface and his dark eyes on his father's face, and he did not move at all for a very long time. And Hoseo did not move either. He simply stayed, present and available and as close as his son needed him to be, which right now meant sitting exactly where he was and letting whatever was happening inside that small chest happen at its own pace without anyone rushing it or naming it or trying to make it smaller than it was. She was there, Jum said finally. His voice was very quiet. Yes, Hoseo said. Tonight. On the street. Yes. And Jum stopped. Started again. I found her. You found her, Hoseo said. Another silence. Longer. She did not know, Jum said. Did she? She did not know who I was. No, Hoseo said. She did not. Do you know? Jum's voice shifted slightly. Something moving through it that was trying very hard to remain what it always was, measured, contained, certain, and finding that harder than usual. Do you know if she? He stopped again. Ask it, Hoseo said gently. Did she want to leave me? Jum asked. And there it was. The question underneath all the other questions. The one that had been sitting at the bottom of this conversation since the moment Hoseo said, she did not leave because she wanted to, and Jum had filed it and carried it here and was only now able to say it out loud. Hoseo left his chair. He came around the desk and he crouched down in front of his son, the same way he had crouched in the hospital corridor, the same way he always came to his son's level when the most important things needed to be said. And he looked at Jum directly. No, he said. She did not want to leave you. She left you to protect you. There is no version of that night 7 years ago in which she wanted to go. Jum looked at his father. His eyes were very bright. He was not crying. He was 7 years old in a pinstripe suit and he was his father's son and he was not crying but his eyes were very bright and Hoseo stayed exactly where he was and did not look away. She kept you safe the only way she could, Hoseo said. And then she built an entire world so that nobody could find her and use her to get to us. That is not leaving. That is the hardest kind of love there is. Jum looked at his father for a very long time. Then he looked down at his hands on the desk. The compass. The stone. The 3 figures. She had another baby, he said. Yes, Hoseo said. A girl. Yes. So I have a sister, Jum said. Hoseo blinked. Of all the directions this conversation could have gone in that moment, Of all the feelings a 7-year-old child could have reached for first when told that the woman he had just protected on a dark street was the mother he had never known. His son had reached for his new sister. Yes, Hoseo said, when he had located his voice. You have a sister. Jum nodded slowly. Processing. Filing. She does not have a name yet, he said. No, Hoseo said. Not yet. Mila said she wanted to look at her until the name became obvious, Jum said. That sounds like her, Hoseo said quietly. Jum was quiet for another moment. Then he looked at his father with those serious dark eyes and said the thing that Hoseo was entirely unprepared for, even though he was a man who was prepared for most things. Can we go back tomorrow? Jum asked. To the hospital. To see them. Hoseo looked at his son. Yes, he said. We can go back tomorrow. Will you tell her? Jum asked. That I know. Yes, Hoseo said. I will tell her. Will she? Jum paused. Will it be hard for her? To see me? Knowing that I know. Hoseo looked at this child. This extraordinary, serious, careful child, who had just been handed the most enormous piece of information of his 7 years on Earth, and whose first instinct was to consider how it was going to land for the woman it concerned. It might be, Hoseo said honestly, but that does not mean it should not happen. Some hard things are worth doing. Yes, Jum said. That is true. He looked down at the compass on his desk, picked it up, held it in his small hands the way he always did when he was thinking through something important, turning it slowly, feeling its weight. Daddy, he said. Yes. The person who frightened her, Jum said. The one from your world. The one Beck told you about tonight in the corridor. Hoseo went still. You heard, he said. I did not hear the name, Jum said. But I saw your face. He looked up at his father. And I need you to promise me something. What? Promise me, Jum said, that whatever you do about it, you will make sure she is safe first. Her and the baby. Before anything else. Hoseo looked at his son holding the compass in his small hands in his charcoal pinstripe suit at 1:30 in the morning, asking him to put the safety of a woman he had met a few hours ago, a woman who was, though he now knew it, his mother, above everything else. I promise, Hoseo said. Jum nodded. He put the compass down. All right, he said. I am ready to sleep now. Hoseo stood. He helped his son out of the pinstripe jacket, hanging it carefully on the back of the desk chair the way Jum always wanted it hung, and he walked him to his room and sat at the edge of his bed the way he always did at the end of the day, and the city glittered outside the window and the Han River moved in the dark and neither of them said anything for a while. Then Jum said from the pillow, Daddy. Yes. She walked to the stretcher with her back straight. Yes, Hoseo said. She did. That is something, Jum said quietly. Is it not? Yes, Hoseo said. It is. He waited until Jum's breathing changed. Then he stood up. He walked back through the apartment to the window that faced the Han River, and he stood there in his dark charcoal suit with his hands in his pockets and he looked at the water for a long time. Then he took out his phone. He looked at the declined call from earlier. He looked at the name above it. Kong Soo-hyun. 9 years. 3 chairs to his left. Every meeting. Every decision. Every piece of information about every person in Hoseo's life flowing through the organization like water through pipes. And Kong Soo-hyun sitting at the center of it knowing everything. Including Mila. Including what had been threatened. Including possibly what had been done. Hoseo put the phone back in his pocket. He was not going to call back. He was going to do something much more considered than that. He was going to find out exactly how deep it went. And then, his phone buzzed. Not a call this time. A message. From a number he did not recognize. No name. No context. Just 7 words. She should have stayed gone. Warn her. Hoseo read the message 3 times. Not because he did not understand it. He understood it completely on the first reading. He read it 3 times because he was a man who did not act on the first wave of anything. Not anger, not fear, not the particular cold clarity that was moving through him right now like water finding the lowest point of a room. And 3 readings gave him the time to locate every feeling, name it accurately, and place it where it needed to be before he decided what came next. She should have stayed gone. Warn her. 7 words. He stood at the window with the Han River below him and Seoul glittering in every direction, and his son sleeping in the next room, and he looked at those 7 words for a long time. Then he did something that would have surprised anyone who did not know him well. He almost smiled. Not from happiness. Not from anything close to it. But from the particular recognition of a man who has just received confirmation of something he suspected and finds that certainty, even terrible certainty, is cleaner than uncertainty. He had spent 7 years not knowing. The not knowing had been its own kind of weight. This message from this unknown number, sent within hours of Mila's reappearance in Seoul, told him several things simultaneously. They knew she was back. They knew she was at the hospital. They knew Hoseo knew. And they were afraid. Afraid people made mistakes. Afraid people overreached. And overreach always left traces. He forwarded the message to Beck with 4 words of his own. Find the number. Tonight. Then he put the phone in his pocket and stood at the window a while longer, not because he needed to think. He knew exactly what he was going to do, the shape of it already assembling itself with the clean efficiency of a man who had spent his adult life making decisions in difficult circumstances, but because he needed 1 more minute of this. Of the city and the river and the quiet apartment and his son sleeping in the next room before everything that was coming began moving at the speed it was going to move. Then he went to his desk. He sat down. And he began making a list. Mila did not sleep. She had tried. She had closed her eyes in the small white hospital room with her daughter sleeping in the bassinet beside her, and the monitor tracking its quiet green heartbeat, and the Seoul night pressing against the window, and she had told herself that her body needed rest and that her mind needed to stop and that everything that needed to be dealt with would still be there in the morning and none of it would be helped by lying awake in a hospital bed at 2 in the morning cataloging every decision she had made in the last 7 years. Her body agreed with all of this completely. Her mind declined to cooperate. So she lay with her eyes open in the dark of the room and she let it come. All of it. Because she was alone and her daughter was sleeping and there was nobody here to be strong for, and she was so tired of being strong that just for this 1 hour, in this one room, she was going to let herself feel the full size of this night without managing it. Bujin. 2 years. She had given 2 years to a man who had been sent to find her. Who had stood at a gala in a beautiful suit and looked at her across a room with what she had believed was genuine feeling and it had been, what? A performance. A job. An assignment handed down by people who had been watching her from a distance for years, waiting for the moment to reach back in. She had been so careful. She had spent 7 years being so careful. She pressed her hands flat against the bed and breathed. And then Yuna. 18 months. 18 months of handing over her schedule, her passwords, her board decisions, her private correspondence, her medical appointments, her life, to a woman who was married to the man who was married to her. The geometry of it was almost elegant in its cruelty. Almost. If you could call cruelty elegant. If you could look at something designed specifically to dismantle a person and find anything in it but the cold calculation of people who had decided she was a problem requiring a solution. She was so tired of being someone else's problem. Her daughter made a small sound in the bassinet. Not crying. Just the small unconscious sounds of a newborn adjusting to the enormous fact of being alive in the world. Mila turned her head and looked at her in the dark. At the tiny bundled shape of her. At the rise and fall of the white blanket. At the fingers curled at the edge of it. What have I brought you into? She thought. And then underneath that. Jum. She closed her eyes. She had known it somewhere. Not consciously. Not in the way that could be named or examined, but somewhere in her body, in the specific and unreasonable way that bodies know things before the mind catches up. When he had taken her hand on that street. When he had stood between her and the dark end of the road with his hands clasped behind his back. When she had looked at his face in the hospital room in the light. At those cheekbones that were hers, at those eyes that were. Stop. She was not ready for that yet. She was not going to think about that yet. She was going to get through tonight and then the morning and then whatever came after the morning and she was going to do it the way she had done every impossible thing for the last 7 years. One piece at a time in the correct order without falling apart in the middle. A knock at the door. Soft. Deliberate. She sat up. Come in, she said. The door opened and it was not a nurse. It was a woman Mila had not seen before. Mid-30s Korean, wearing a charcoal-structured blazer over a black turtleneck, dark trousers, low-heeled boots. Her hair was pulled back in a clean low bun. Her face was composed and professional and her eyes were the eyes of someone who was very good at their job, and whose job tonight was specifically this room. Miss Adeyemi, the woman said. Her English was precise and unaccented. My name is Jian. I work for Mr. Hoseo. He sent me. I will be outside your door for the rest of the night. I wanted you to know I was here. Mila looked at her. He sent you tonight, Mila said. Yes. From where? I was already in the building, Jian said simply. He made arrangements before he left. Mila looked at this woman in her charcoal blazer standing in the doorway of a hospital room at 2 in the morning, calm, precise, entirely capable, and felt something move through her that was complicated and unwelcome and entirely familiar. This was what Hoseo did. This was who he was. You told him someone needed protecting, and before you had finished the sentence the protection was already in place. Not loudly. Not with announcement. Just done. Quietly and completely, and without requiring acknowledgement. She had loved that about him once. She was not going to think about what she felt about it now. Thank you, Jian, she said. Of course, Jian said. Is there anything you need before I take my position outside? Mila looked at her daughter in the bassinet. No, she said. We are all right. Jian nodded once. Then rest, she said. Nothing will come near this room. She closed the door softly behind her. Mila sat in the dark for a moment. Then she lay back against the pillows and looked at the ceiling and said, very quietly, to nobody in particular. Hoseo. Just his name. The way you say a word you have been not saying for 7 years, and find that it still fits in your mouth exactly the way it always did. Morning arrived the way Seoul mornings arrived in this part of the city. Not gently, not gradually, but with the sudden conviction of a place that had things to do and intended to get on with them. The light through the hospital room window went from dark to gray to a clean pale gold in what felt like minutes, and with it came the particular sounds of a hospital waking up, the shift change in the corridor, the soft efficient footsteps, the distant sound of a trolley being wheeled somewhere purposeful. Mila was already awake. She had fed her daughter at 4 and again at 6 and was sitting up in the hospital bed when the morning light fully arrived, her daughter in her arms, looking at the tiny face with the focused attention of a woman keeping a promise she had made in the dark to look at her child until the name became obvious. The name was not yet obvious, but she was getting closer. Her phone, retrieved from her clutch by one of the nurses who had found it dead and charged it overnight without being asked, which was the kind of small unrequested kindness that could undo a person if they were not careful, buzzed on the bedside table. She looked at the screen. A message from a number she did not recognize. Good morning. I hope you and the baby rested. I will come at 10 if that is acceptable. There is much to discuss. H. She looked at the message for a moment. Then she looked at her daughter. Your timing, she said softly to the baby, is either very bad or very good. I have not decided which yet. Her daughter yawned enormously, a yawn completely disproportionate to her size, and Mila, despite everything, despite all of it, laughed. A real laugh. Small and surprised, and the first one in what felt like a very long time. She typed back. 10 is fine. He arrived at 9:58. Jum was with him. They came through the maternity ward door together. The tall man in a fresh dark suit, charcoal today with a faint structure to it, white shirt, no tie, dark shoes, the black wool overcoat replaced by a long dark coat that was slightly less severe but no less intentional, and beside him the boy in a fresh charcoal suit, different from last night's pinstripe, this one a deeper gray with a subtle texture, white shirt, dark shoes. His dark hair neatly combed and his posture as straight as it had been at 1 in the morning in a hospital waiting room. They walked the corridor in step without trying to. At the door Hoseo stopped. He looked at his son. You do not have to come in yet, he said. If you need more time. I do not need more time, Jum said. This will be. Daddy, Jum said. He looked up at his father with those serious dark eyes. I held her hand last night on a dark street before I knew who she was. I stood in front of her. I called the emergency number and I stayed until she was safe. A pause. I would have done all of that even if I never found out the rest. So nothing has changed. It has only become more. Hoseo looked at his son for a long moment. Yes, he said quietly. That is exactly right. He knocked. Come in, Mila said from inside. She was sitting up in the hospital bed in a pale gray robe that a nurse had brought her, simple, clean, with none of the drama of last night's Valentino, and her hair was loose around her shoulders the way it had been in the night, and she was holding her daughter against her chest and she looked different from last night. Not better or worse but different. Like something that had been held very tightly for a very long time had been allowed, in the hours between then and now, to breathe slightly. She looked at Hoseo when he came in. Then she looked at Jum. And Jum looked at her. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Hoseo closed the door behind them. "Good morning," Mila said. To both of them. Her voice was steady. "Good morning," Hoseo said. "Good morning," Jum said. He was looking at her with those dark eyes. Her eyes, she could see it in this light. She had seen it last night and pushed it down, but in the morning light of this small white room she could not push it down anymore. And his expression was the most unguarded she had seen it. Not the professional composure of last night. Not the focused determination of the street. Something younger and more open than both of those, something that was simply a 7-year-old boy standing in a hospital room looking at his mother for the first time in conscious memory. "You told him," Mila said to Hoseo. "Yes," Hoseo said. She looked at Jum. "Are you?" she started. Stopped. Started again. "How are you?" "I am all right," Jum said. His voice was even. "Are you all right?" "I am getting there," Mila said honestly. Jum nodded. He looked at the baby in her arms. At the tiny sleeping face. "Has the name become obvious yet?" he asked. Mila looked down at her daughter. "Almost," she said softly. "I thought about it last night," Jum said. "Before I slept. I thought about what name would suit her." Mila looked at him. "And," she said. "I think," Jum said seriously, "she looks like someone who will be very certain about things. Even when she is small. Like she already knows what she thinks and is simply waiting until she can say it." Mila stared at him. Something happened in her chest that was so large and so sudden that she had to look away for a moment. At the window, at the sole morning light coming through it. At the ordinary gold of a regular day doing its regular thing outside a hospital window while everything inside the room was anything but regular. She looked back at Jum. "Come and sit," she said. Her voice was not entirely steady anymore. "Please. Both of you." Hoseo took the chair beside the bed. Jum came and stood at the side of the bed. Not sitting, standing in his particular way. And he looked at the baby in Mila's arms and Mila looked at him, and for a moment nobody said anything, and the morning light held all three of them in it, and the monitor tracked its quiet green heartbeat, and the city moved outside the window, and it was the most ordinary, extraordinary moment any of them had ever been in. "Jum," Mila said. "Yes." She looked at him directly. Dark eyes to dark eyes. Her cheekbones in his face. His father's eyes looking back at her. "I have wanted to." She stopped. Pressed her lips together. Started again. "There is so much I want to say to you. And I know that this morning is a lot. And I know that you did not know last night. And I am. You do not need to apologize," Jum said. She blinked. "You protected me," he said. "In the only way you could. My father explained it." A pause. "I understand what you did. And why." Mila looked at this 7-year-old boy in his gray-textured suit standing at her bedside with his hands at his sides and his back straight and his eyes steady, and she thought, with the deep specific recognition of a mother who has not been a mother in conscious practice but has never stopped being one, "There you are. There you are." "Thank you," she said. Very quietly. "You already thanked me last night," Jum said. "That was for the street," Mila said. "This is for something else." Jum held her gaze. Then he did something that nobody in the room was prepared for. He reached out his small hand, the same hand that had held hers on the dark Soul Street the night before, the same hand that had reached for her with quiet certainty while his other held a phone to his ear, and he placed it very gently on top of her free hand where it rested on the bed beside her daughter. Not holding, just resting, quietly, deliberately, the gesture of a child who has thought about something and decided, and is now doing it without drama or announcement because that is simply who he is. Mila looked down at his small hand on hers. Then she turned her hand over slowly and held it. Hoseo looked at the window. At the soul morning. At the city that had held all of this weight and history and loss and the extraordinary accident of last night. Without knowing, without caring, the way cities always did. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Beck. He looked at the message. Number traced. Burner. But we have a location. The message was sent from inside a building, you know. I am sending the address now. The address arrived. Hoseo looked at it. His jaw set. Because the address Beck had sent was not a stranger's building. It was not somewhere across the city, or in another district, or in any of the places where enemies operated at a comfortable distance. It was 4 floors below the office where Hoseo held every organization meeting. It was inside his own building. Which meant whoever had sent that message had not just known about Mila. They had been watching Hosieo's response to her reappearance from 4 floors below him. In real time. From inside the walls he had built to keep the people he loved safe. He put the phone in his pocket. He looked at Mila holding his son's hand in the morning light. He looked at his son's straight back and steady eyes. He looked at the sleeping newborn in the crook of Mila's arm. And he made a decision, quiet and total and irreversible, that whatever it cost, whatever it required, whatever had to be dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up, these 3 people were going to be safe. All 3. Starting now. He stood up from the chair. Mila, he said. She looked at him. I need to tell you something, he said. And I need you to listen to all of it before you respond. She looked at his face, at the set of his jaw, at the particular quality of stillness around him that she recognized from 7 years ago, as the thing that came over him when something had just become very serious and he had already decided what to do about it. All right, she said. You cannot go back to the penthouse, he said. Not today. Not until I tell you it is safe. And I need you to trust me on that. I was not planning to go back, she said carefully. Good, he said. Because there is something else. What? He looked at her directly. The people who sent those men last night, he said. They know you are here. They know you are with me. And they are closer than either of us should be comfortable with. Mila held his gaze. How close? She asked. Hoseo was quiet for exactly 1 second. Close enough, he said, that I am moving you today. You and the baby. Somewhere that is not connected to me in any way that they can trace. Hoseo. Mila. His voice was quiet, firm. Not the firmness of a man overriding a woman's decision, but the firmness of a man who has a specific piece of information and needs her to understand its weight. The message last night said, she should have stayed gone. The room went very still. Jum looked at his father, then at Mila, then at his father again. They sent a message, Mila said. Not a question. Yes. To you. Yes. She looked down at her daughter, at the tiny sleeping face, at the fingers curled like small question marks. When she looked back up, her eyes were steady and her jaw was set, and she was, Hoseo thought, looking at her. Exactly who she had always been. Exactly who she had been on that street last night. Walking to the stretcher with her back straight. Where are you moving us? She asked. Somewhere safe, he said. I will explain everything when we get there. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Jum. Jum looked at her with his serious dark eyes and said nothing. But the hand that was resting on top of hers pressed very slightly. Just enough. She looked back at Hoseo. All right, she said. But Hoseo. Yes. When we get there, she said. You tell me everything. Not the version you decide I can handle. Everything. Yes, he said. And I mean Woojin. And Yuna. And whoever sent that message. All of it. All of it, he said. Yes. She nodded once. The nod of a woman who has made a decision and will not be revisiting it. She looked down at her daughter one more time. And quietly, with the certainty of something that had been waiting to be obvious, the name arrived. Sioa, she said softly. Her name is Sioa. Jum looked at the baby. Sioa, he said, testing it, feeling the weight of it. Then he nodded. Yes, he said. That is right. And in the corridor outside the room, 4 floors below an office in a building Hoseo owned, a phone was picked up. A voice said one sentence. She is still there. And the boy is with her. And the line went dead. To be continued in episode 4. Black Silk Stories is done, and if you are not gripping something right now, we need to have a conversation. They named the baby. Jum held her hand. And someone 4 floors below Hoseo's own office just made a phone call that changes everything coming next. Episode 4 is where the walls start closing in. And Hoseo is about to find out exactly who he has been trusting with his life. Subscribe so you are first when it drops. Comment and tell us, when Jum put his hand on Mila's, did you feel it? Share this with someone who needs a story this real. Black Silk Stories. We are nowhere near done.